Here we go. Hey, everybody. It's Richard Harris, and I'm here with Scott Leese from Surf and Sales. We are doing our Surf and Sales podcast, and we are really excited to talk today with Sarah Drake from Directive. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Sarah is from Orange County, and as I understand it, we're not allowed to say LA. We have to say Orange County because that's just the way the world works down there.
Yep.
That's okay. We get it. It's all right. Scott's joining us from Austin. I'm up here in the North Bay and outside San Francisco, and we're really, really excited about the Surf and Sales podcast. So thank you for joining us. Before we jump into everything, Sarah, why don't you share with everybody how you and I even met in the first place? Because this for me, I think this is a great story of how the world works these days.
Sure. So early on in my career, I wanted to build up my network with sales professionals in the space. So I connected with Richard Harris and was following his content. He posted a post and said, if you ever need any help with sales, here's my cell phone number. And I was like, bold move. Put in your cell phone number on the internet? Like, okay. He said, call me. I bet you people won't call me. I'm always up for a good challenge. So my colleague Kyle and I, we called him, but he didn't answer. So I kind of was like, let's kind of mess with him and see, it'll be memorable. Let's do that. So I left a voicemail pretending like he was a doctor. So I said, Dr. Harris, 15 minutes after my scheduled appointment and the office door is locked. I'm kind of confused. What's going on here? I have an appointment with you. Pause. And I was like, just kidding. It's Sarah Drake and Kyle Willis from Directive. Saw your post on LinkedIn. We've been connected for a while. Would love to have a conversation with you, pick your brain, get some feedback from you on what we're currently working on. And so now I refer to him as Dr. Harris, and we've just kind of built this relationship over time. And so I just think that is a hysterical origin story. One of my favorite from early on in this job too. So
that's great. That feeds Richard.
Scott was rolling his eyes because he hates when I do that, because I watched him do it once and then I've taken it to a whole other level. So
yeah, I didn't ask people to call me. I asked people to text me.
There you go. Yeah. See, I'm a little bolder than Scott.
Well, maybe, but there's also a generational thing there. I'm a little younger and hipper. You still use the phone.
Right. Exactly. So I want to go a little bit back. I know, Scott, you had a question for Sarah about her origin story, so I'll sort of let you start there.
Yeah, I'm just always fascinated in general by how people got into sales. I've sort of always said that sales is like this garbage can of jobs. Like we just end up there somehow. Like there's liberal arts majors and people who didn't go to school. It's like nobody really started off, their life saying, "Oh, I want to be a salesperson."
Yeah.
Right. So I love to hear how people got into the profession. So walk us through, how you got into sales, Sarah.
Sure. So my first job was in restaurants. So I was a host and then a server. And so I didn't really, in hindsight, I'm like, that really was sales. Because it's very much like cold calling. You don't know what type of table you're going to get. You don't know what's going to be thrown at you that day. And so as a server, there's just a lot of sales involved naturally between like upselling. Someone wants to add chicken to their salad, or you're trying to sell them a dessert. You have sales goals. If you sell a lot of food that night or whatever it is, you get better shifts. And so working in restaurants kind of gave me a taste of sales, but I didn't really look at it like that. I went to Cal State Fullerton. I was a business major, but I was more towards marketing. So I didn't emphasis on marketing.
Did you have any sales courses offered to you at all in your?
Actually, yes.
Really?
And so we could take 2 electives. And so you could take like sports marketing, you could do like some other niches of marketing. But I was like, let's do sales. I already had a little bit of sales experience in restaurants. Let's try it out. So I took 2 sales classes in college, but that was pretty much the extent.
What did they teach you in a sales course in college?
So it was interesting. We did some like personality assessments. We did the DISC assessment. And so I am a DI, so it's like dominance and I think influence. And so we would interact with other people based on their like personality type. And okay, this person is much more analytical. So if you are a very like a very talkative person and very emotional, like you might not gel as well with them, take it down a notch. So those types of psychological sales skills, super interesting. And then just some things about sales operations. We actually got in and used Salesforce a lot, which I use in my job now. So thank you, Cal State Fullerton. So that was
cool.
neat. And the business program at Cal State Fullerton had a ton of great internship options. And so I saw the internship posting for Frito-Lay, and I am a huge fan of like hot Cheetos, barbecue twists. I'm like, let's go intern for them because they have to give the intern the free chips. Maybe I could be the taste tester or something.
Oh my God.
And so I originally thought the internship was marketing because I was in marketing, applied for it, got the job. They're like, hey, so this internship is a sales internship. I was like, oh, all right, let's do it.
Sarah Drake, seller of Cheetos.
Right? I was like, free, like barbecue lays, I'm like your sole buyer. And so got the inside sales position, which was really more of an outside sales position, me driving around in my Altima selling contracts to their small business unit. And so that was my first taste of professional sales.
I want to slow you down for a second because I want to talk a little bit about goals and goal setting and stuff. So even going back to the restaurant, you said you had sales goals. What kind of goals were those on a daily basis, right? That's a transactional sales environment, right? It's inbound leads, for lack of a better phrase. What kind of sales goals did they try to put in front of you?
So a lot of them were revenue goals. So if you're selling like $800 to $1,000 worth of food in the
day,
a day. So a shift
or whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did they explain to you like how they came up with that number being the meaningful kind of quota number? Just curious.
No, they just would set it really high, and it was a lot of times it was as a team. Like, hey, tonight we want to sell $10,000 worth of food, or maybe it's a new restaurant menu item that they're trying to push. Right. Let's sell 15 of these and we all get a free meal or whatever it might be. So it was always some sort of like competition or goal that we were trying to hit, whatever it might be.
And did they want you to push the alcohol more because the margin is higher there, or how did that fit into it? Like, because you know, you have different products and services, for lack of a better description, right? Mm-hmm. Did they care, like, we want this much revenue from this and this much revenue from food, or did they really just look at a gross revenue number? I'm just curious. Like, I don't know why.
They would get the numbers back from corporate, or the like alcohol sales are down, or we're just releasing this new menu item, or the margin on this specific menu item is really high. Let's sell this. So they would get that information. And for a lot of us, like, I worked with people who were like 16, 18, 20 years old, where those things might go over their head, where it was just like, they would turn that into a competition. Like I mentioned, like sell X amount of these. So I knew it was coming down from corporate, but I wasn't super sure on the specifics of what they wanted, but they would always turn that into something that, like, get a free meal or whatever it was, or like, got to sell those martinis, man. I want a free dinner.
I wonder now that you're, a few more years into your career, like, when you get sales goals passed down to you from corporate or from above or wherever you get them from, is there an explanation now? Do you tolerate that same kind of ambiguity? That's one of the things I think that drives a lot of sales. Well, a lot of VPs of sales nuts when they get goals handed down to them that, seemingly come out of thin air. And I'm sure the same is true for directors and managers and AEs and SDRs. So I'm curious, looking back on that, like, do you see anything wrong with that? And would you accept that level of ambiguity now?
I think that's a great question, and not something that I've really thought of before. I think when you work in a restaurant, you feel a little more like a cog in a machine, like just a server, and there's so many different levels of management when you're on the front lines. And so you just kind of take it because you need to, or if you don't follow the rules, and you just don't get shifts. So now I work in a more lean team. So I'm very close with management in the sense that they're very transparent and very open about goals. And so comparing the two, it's really interesting. Whereas before it was like, okay, this is how a job works. It was my first job. Management tells you what to do. They tell you the goals. You can ask questions, but it might not be in your favor. Whereas now, working in a smaller organization that's growing together, it's really nice to have the other side of things where I can ask those questions. I can be transparent with them. And
are they transparent back? Do they say, well, hey, Sarah, that's a great question. Here's how we got to this number?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll show us the data or walk us through the data and the reasoning behind goals. And a lot of time in preliminary stages, like they will come for our input because we are on the front lines. So working backwards, or like, what do you see on the front lines? And then work towards, like, start to put goals in motion based on historical data, but also asking us, because we're the ones going out and doing the sales, like, what are you hearing? Are people pushing back on specific things? Like, and then they're working the goals that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's important for people to hear, because I don't think a lot of organizations operate like that. And if you're in an organization that doesn't have that level of transparency, it's something to consider. You know, it's something to think about, whether or not you want to be there long term, and whether or not you're being set up for as much success as you're chasing. Mm-hmm. So how do you make the decision, and why do you make the decision to leave the food services industry and go to Directive, where you are now as an SDR, and then eventually move your way up to a senior SDR where you are now? So what propelled you to finally make that shift? It's a story that's, in my experience, extremely common. There's a lot of salespeople who come from the services, food, restaurant industry, and many of them have been extremely successful in software sales. So what made you finally get to that place to, pull the trigger and make the jump?
Well, I was working in restaurants from late high school all the way through college. And so it was always something that I could have my own money to spend, didn't have to rely on the parents and such. And so once I got my degree, I was definitely thinking more full-time. And with a full-time job comes the stability. I mean, comes benefits. You know what hours you're going to work. Whereas serving, like, there's so many variables. Like, you didn't have a good sales, your hours get cut, or you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, but why sales? Like, you got a degree, you're young enough that, in your career, you could have decided, hey, I could have gone into marketing, mm-hmm. I could go into sales, I could go into business finance or HR. Like, mm-hmm. What about sales drew you in as you started to look at your first professional gig?
That's a good question. I wasn't necessarily super set on sales. The thing is I knew I had real world sales experience with my internship that I mentioned earlier. Yeah. But I had my degree in marketing. So I didn't necessarily have any working experience in marketing. And so I was like, okay, would it be easier for me to get a sales job with this experience? Or should I rely on my degree and try to go into marketing? And so kind of how it happened is I was very open in my job searches. So I did sales, marketing, just wanted to look at the market, wanted to see what options were available. When I saw the open position for Directive, I had a friend that I went to college with that worked here. And so I was like, that's great. I can ask him about the company, see what it's like. It was a sales position. He said, love the company. I think you'd really like it here. You should try it out. My thinking behind that was, if I'm going to work in sales for a marketing company, it's kind of like a hybrid of my two passions. They're going to have to teach me the marketing skills that I might not have used, real world skills that I might not have learned in college. And then I'd be selling those to people using my experience and my passion in kind of one hybrid role. And so that was kind of the reasoning behind why I got into sales, was more of the position itself and the company itself. And that was offered at the time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes total sense. So I'm going to interrupt this story for a very funny story. Sarah, you know where this story's going, I think. Mm-hmm. So Scott, you'll like this. So I was at Dreamforce this year, and I was at the Emergence Capital event, thanks to Doug Landis. So shout out to Doug for getting me in at the last minute. And I'm just sitting there sort of watching things, and I happen to be sitting or standing next to a good friend of mine named Danny, who works over at G2, and he was with this woman, Hannah. And Hannah and I start talking, and she's like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a sales trainer. I'm like, what do you do? She's, I'm a director of sales and marketing. I used to be in marketing. Now I sort of run sales. I'm like, oh, I'm like, what company? She goes, Directive. And for a second, it couldn't click with me. I was like, why do I know that name? Why do I know that name? And I started talking, and she's like, yeah, we've been talking about sales training. And I got to tell you, there's this one saleswoman who, she's really, really good, but, sometimes I think she's like punching above her weight class, and she doesn't know it, but she's really good and she's really passionate. And one time she even went so far as to like call this trainer and talk to him. And this trainer like sent this really long email back saying, oh my God, if what you're telling me is true, your company makes a ton of mistakes. You need to look at this, and you need to look at this and look at this. And she's like, and I love Sarah's passion, but who the hell is this guy to send this message back to Sarah? Like, Sarah, you don't even know this yet, do you? No. And I said, is that woman's name Sarah Drake? And she goes, yeah. And I said, yeah, I'm the asshole.
The universe, man, the universe.
Yeah. And so, and the reason I tell this story is because, one, it's hilarious, but two, like, we talk about Silicon Valley being a small world or sales being a small world, but here I am at like the world's biggest sales conference, right? Like literally Dreamforce. And out of sheer randomness, I'm running into somebody. And Hannah and I had a good laugh about it. Like, I think, I said, I sort of called her out on it. I'm like, well, you may not like what I had to say, but is it true? And she's like, well, there's another side to the story. I said, well, of course there's another side to the story, but that doesn't change the fact that this isn't happening or this isn't happening, at least. And I said, at least perception is reality. Like, you may have a different opinion, but somewhere internally, you guys got to work this stuff out, whether it's me or somebody else. So I know that, we met, Sarah. Did you know that was part of the story?
I didn't know that was part of the story, no. But when she had told me, I was like, what a small world. I mean, Dreamforce is not a small conference. That is for sure.
No.
So the odds of that.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm that guy who sent that email to you, who then you shared with your boss, who then was like, who does this person think he is? Who's this Richard guy? Anyway, I want to come back to your story a little bit more about sales. And the one thing I want to point out to other people who are listening or watching, which is, I love that you sort of said, hey, I'm coming out of college. I've got this degree in marketing. I think about sales. I think there's a lot of people in that world, right? Coming out of college, and they're not really sure where to go. And the one thing I want to remind people too, and this is for executives as well, for those of you hiring or moving into the SDR role, that's your gateway drug. Like, that's your gateway into this business world. And just because you start out at 20, whatever, as an SDR doesn't mean you have to go into sales, right? Nobody cares. Like, your job is to go in and do your job and do it well, and then earn the right to go and say, well, I want to go into marketing now, right? So I just want to make sure that people understand that the SDR role, at least in my opinion, isn't sales only. And companies love to present it that way for career advancement, but that's very short-sighted on their part. So I wanted to sort of, one, pause and give you that advice, Sarah, but two, also to those listening, like, don't think SDR means you can only go to an AE role. So,
but also make sure you heard what Richard said when he said, earn the right, because I think we've all been around people who come in a particular role, really want this other role. And then after like 2 weeks or one good performance, like, okay, I want to go to this other role now. And that's not the right way to maneuver. Right.
And tenure doesn't matter either. I don't care if you've been there a year or 2 years. If someone else comes in and does it faster and better than you, I have to respect that. So, tenure matters a little bit, but not as much. So Sarah, I want to shift a little bit. Sort of move. You started doing some of your own social branding, right? You've spent some time on LinkedIn, either writing posts, responding to people, doing videos a little bit. Like, what was your first thing to go, okay, I'm going to try this? Like, what made you even go, I think this is part of the game?
I had always loved social media, like whether it be Instagram, Snapchat. I just love that you can connect with anyone across the world and stay in contact with people, your good friends or what have you. And so when I first started this career, I saw people posting all the time, other SDRs posting. And I was like, why am I spending my time on all these other social medias that aren't going to move my career? So what I did was this is actually kind of funny. I deleted all other social media from my phone, not the accounts, but deleted the apps. And only, so I wanted to like try it out. And so I only had LinkedIn on my phone. And so if I wanted to go on social media, I wanted to like, post, comment, and do all the things that I love to do on the other platforms, I would only allow myself to do it on LinkedIn. And so that kind of spurred me to always comment on people's stuff. They would comment back in mine. I would meet people like you. I was like, this platform, yes, it's a business platform, but that doesn't mean you can't get the same human connection and do the same things that you're doing on the other platforms on this platform. So the more I started to comment, like I call it the snowball effect. It's like the more I commented, the more people commented back, the more likes my post got, the like more conversations I was having, the more people I was meeting, the more like podcasts I was able to be on or Zoom calls of learning from people. And so I think it all started with me just like heads down, putting everything I could into the platform. So that's how it started.
Scott, you chimed in when you heard she's cut out all the other social media. Explain that a little bit, right? Like, because explain it particularly to me since you're so much younger than me. Right?
Well, there's two schools of thought for me, and one of them is just like trying to eliminate distractions and all about the efficiency and all that, right? And I think that for the purposes of this conversation, that's like the main reason that I love it. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've tried to give that advice to people who work for me. Don't have to delete your account, just like take it off your phone, right? I tell people all the time, like, stop looking at videos on Instagram and start connecting with people on LinkedIn. People are always asking me like, how did you get so many connections on LinkedIn? And your posts get looked at so much. I'm like, well, I made a point to make a habit out of connecting with people, not goofing around on, Snapchat and Instagram and all of these kind of things. So,
YouTube.
And yeah, all of it. So like I've deleted deleted. I'm down to Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, and I'm like 95% sure I'm deleting Facebook altogether on January 1st. And then there's like the other part of me that is just like going to get riled up about politics and how, Facebook's ruined everything for so many people.
Yeah, but
I'll leave that part out, Richard.
Yeah, no, we don't need to go down that path.
Yeah.
So Sarah, you said, you were following people. Who are some of the people who are the people you like to follow? Because I think everybody who does podcasts or LinkedIn or looking to build this always likes to find somebody new to listen to or to learn from. So who do you like listening to and learning from?
I really loved the Sales Development podcast by David Delaney, Tenbound. He was one of the first sales podcasts that I listened to, and his voice is very nice to listen to. He has a great voice, and also the sales content he was putting out, I resonated with because it was solely focused on sales development. Sales and sales development can be two different things if you're driving pipeline as an SDR versus selling contracts for free-to-lay. That it's very different inner workings. And so I started following his podcast and then following him on LinkedIn. Obviously, Richard Harris, Scott Leese, two people that I like to follow, as well as Josh Braun. I've been seeing his content so much more now. It's like the algorithm sees me like one thing and keeps sending me stuff by Josh Braun, and I love it. I love people that are very transparent in their wording.
How can you tell for you, like, how do you tell when somebody's being transparent or not? I've been seeing all these posts recently where people are sort of saying, I know that you folks out there like are, have bots running all this stuff. Like, we can see you. I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. I can't tell if somebody has a bot running stuff for them. I certainly don't. But like, how can you tell if somebody's being authentic or real? Like, what speaks to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like a lot of times transparency could be a little bit of a buzzword on social media, where it's like, how do you know if someone's being transparent if you don't actually know them as a human being? You only see their post. So
Right.
how do you know? And so a lot of times it can be multiple different factors. I mean, I watch a lot of Josh Braun's videos, and just the way he's portrayed in those videos and the language and style of his posts go hand in hand. So he maintains a consistent message is what I've always seen. And so if this person is always adds humor to their posts and you just see consistency from them, I feel like that is transparent as well. If they're saying, hey, give me a call, here's my phone number, message me, I'll help you, all these things. I get it, people are busy, but if you reach out to that person and they don't respond to you, or they give you kind of like no sort of response, that's another thing for me, where it's like, I'm busy too. I'm arguably, people are way busier than I am, but if you are preaching something on the platform, but you're also just like not giving back to people like you're saying that you are, I don't see that as very transparent. And I've come across both types of people on the platform. So that's another thing too.
What, do you remember your first post on LinkedIn, or your first video maybe?
I think my first post was most likely centered around cold calling, I believe. I think someone had hung up on me early on.
Oh, I remember that post of yours. Yep.
Yeah, that one got some really, that was, if we want to talk about like posts that got a ton of traction,
Yeah.
That was one that really stuck out to me. I think a lot of my posts, I kind of like to start it in the sense of like a story, or like hooking someone at the beginning in maybe like a funny manner. And so what had happened, you had commented on this post, Richard, where I said, hey, it's Sarah from Direct, and they hung up on me.
Right.
And I was like, what did I do wrong? Like, were they just having a bad day? Was it my voice? What is it? And I, at the end of the post, had said, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, I was doing my job. Like, what would be wrong of me is to let that stop me from picking the phone up again. That would be wrong. And so I kind of at the end asked just like a very open-ended, like, what do you think about this? And it went off. I think people just really resonated with the fact of like, you can't always control if someone's going to hang up on you, but like you can control whether or not you're going to let that affect your entire day. Because it has affected me negatively before, and I didn't want that to happen. And it was cool that it resonated with so many people.
So yeah, I mean, I think anybody in sales can relate to the rejection and the like having to protect your self-confidence and all that kind of stuff. And that, so it makes sense to me that kind of post would resonate. People love those stories, and they love to kind of share and like the group wallow just for a second, and then get picked back up by everybody who's like, you know, that happened to me too. Shake it off, right? We all kind of, as a community of people, I think, thrive on that kind of back and forth and that kind of interaction.
How do you, Sarah, what are 2 or 3 things, if you're having a down day, if you want to give people advice who are getting started in sales and they are having that initial rejection, right? First, second week on the phone, or maybe they've been really successful, but now they're in a slump. What are the things Sarah says to Sarah to keep herself going?
I would say, Sarah, you can't control other people. You can only control what you do and how you react to what other people do. And so if I'm going into a cold call and someone hangs up on me and I feel like I didn't do a very good job, it's very easy for me to kind of get in this cycle of like, am I actually good at this? Like, is that how all my calls have gone and I've just gotten lucky? Where it's like, no, you pick up the phone again, you keep trying, you keep doing the repetitions, and know that people are going to have a bad day. And maybe you call that, it's happened where I've called that person back the next week. I was scared too, because they had hung up on me and was so angry that I called them. And I ended up booking a meeting with them down the pipeline, and a deal has closed. And so it's like, people have off days. We're all human beings. But I think the number one thing for me is like detaching from it being a personal attack on you. It's not a personal attack on you 90% of the time, unless they saw your name and hated you for some other reason. That's your own problem. But if you're cold calling them, they don't know you and they hang up on you, that's not on you. Like, just everything's fine. So
what for you, what is now the hardest part of your role as a senior SDR, right? So we all have good and bad days, but like you've gone through this this place now where, it's not about you. Seems like you know how to deal with the rejection and keep going and not lose confidence. So now that you're in the role, what's the toughest part for you? And how are you trying to get better at that part, and what's next as you look ahead? Like, where do you want to take your career next?
Yeah. I would say after being in this role, I've been in this role for about 15 months now. And I think it's when I've done my research before I call a prospect and they're checking off all the boxes of someone that needs to talk to me and needs our help, and you call them and try your best to handle all the objections and they're just not seeing it in your point of view. It's probably one of the most frustrating things in the world when you're like, you check off all the boxes as someone that definitely needs our help, answering all the questions that I asked you, and you're still not about it. You won't even take a meeting with me. I think it's those type of things where I talk to enough people who definitely need what we're selling, or like are in the same position as you are, but they're just not resonating with how I'm telling the story, or maybe it's the questions I'm asking, where it's what's worked for me so many times in the past doesn't always work. And I think that's a huge pill to swallow, where it's like each person that you call is going to be different. Just because you have tenure in a position and know what you're selling and know what they need, it's not always going to go in your favor.
So what are the things that you're doing now to try to overcome that and try to get better at that point? No one's ever going to be perfect. We're all going to go to like that, right?
Agreed. I think for me, it's asking better questions. Whereas before I was answering questions that were easy to like say no, like, oh, do you need more MQLs? They're like, no, we're good, hang up. Whereas a question would be like, if we were able to increase your MQLs by 25% this quarter, would that impact your business? Would that get you closer to your goals? You can't really say no to a question like that. So they're saying, well, yeah, it would. And then asking maybe another question to try to like slowly earn their trust is something that I've been trying to do better. Asking better questions, asking questions that prove that I'm an authority and understand their business. Very thoughtful questions, if that makes sense. Not just like, hey, do you need this? Like, no, just asking more questions like that. I've been trying to do more, and it's been helpful.
Great. And what's next? Where do you want to go next? Are you on the path towards AE? Do you see yourself one day getting into sales leadership? Do you want to eventually go back to marketing, kind of where you started, and take the thing full circle? Or are you undecided? Undecided would be a bad answer, by the way. If Richard and I were coaching somebody, don't be undecided. Pick one.
I like it when someone tells me what the bad answer is, so I can stay away from it. So I appreciate that.
Well, Richard thinks it's fine. I 100% don't think it's fine. So.
I think you still got a little bit of time before you need to decide. It's kind of like being a freshman.
You make a decision and then you change the decision.
Yeah.
But Scott,
that's a different way to frame it, Richard.
Did you declare your major your freshman year? Come on. Did you, Scott?
I made a decision and then I changed it.
There you go.
That's all.
That's all I'm saying.
I was very confident in the initial decision, though. It's just a different way to frame it. Anyway, Sarah.
Back to Sarah, who people really want to hear from.
This is interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. One of our account executives, because the normal, quote unquote, normal path for an SDR is to go to an AE and be in a closing role. But like we mentioned, the options are endless. One of our account executives was in a closing role, taking mostly inbound leads. They had actually turned him inwards. So now he is more on the referrals and upsells types of business. And he flies out to clients. It's very client relational. And we don't necessarily have like a word for that here yet, but I would compare it heavily to customer success. Have like working with clients, putting out fires if there is any, building solid relationships, being the liaison between the company and the client. And now that we're getting more clients, he's having to fly a lot of places and has a lot on his plate. And I'm like, do you maybe need someone on your team? We can call this customer success and roll with it. And so I think something that fascinates me is working with current clients talking to people who want to talk to me a little more than someone I cold call in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. And I think because I have been solely outbound as an SDR, it really excites me to be able to work with current clients and share the passion that I've shared with people who didn't even know me, with people who know Directive, and build on that with them. I think is exciting. We don't necessarily have a spot open for that, but I think if I try to like weasel my way in or talk about my passions, then maybe they could figure something out.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier to grow and keep a client than it is to find a new one, right? So once you have those clients, you kind of have to do whatever it takes. My second client ever was Gainsight when they had 12 employees. My favorite story to say is I should have taken stock instead of money, but but Nick has done an amazing job, and you're spot on. Is like, yeah, I know you kind of got excited about jumping on the plane and sort of the excitement of traveling and all that, which I think is great, but it's still really about that relationship and fostering that growth mentality, which I think is the most important thing, and maintaining those customers and making sure that they're happy and understanding that. And then in that role, even becoming the feedback loop back to product marketing, back to marketing, back to the SDR. Like, that's the one beautiful thing about that role, is that there's so much knowledge that the entire company can leverage to continue to grow the company, that it's an amazing category. So I think that's a fun place if you can get into that role. I think that's great. I think you do really well at it, just having known you for the last year or so.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate the encouragement.
I have a question for you, and we didn't ask you this, but you got a question for us? What can we do to help you? Like, you've been really kind to come on and give us your time to be on the podcast. So we certainly want to get back to you in a way that's maybe different than other podcasts people listen to.
Yeah, I would say, what skills, like if I was to leave sales or go into a different role, like what are the top couple of skills that you think are truly transferable to other positions? Like what are the skills that you learned in sales that you're like, I could really take this anywhere and do well with these skills? Maybe like one or two that stick out.
Scott's going to answer this because he's managed people more than I have recently.
All right, Scott.
I can see him, and he's chomping at the bit. Scott's ready to jump on this one.
Well, she's like, if I leave sales and go to another role, like, what's the one skill that's most transferable? And I'm thinking, well, fucking sales is the most transferable thing. So you're already working on it. Yeah, duh. Like, go be a CEO of some company. Like, you gotta sell. You go be marketing. You're selling something. So you're always selling. You're parenting. You're selling. Trust Richard and I on that one. I think understanding people is probably the most important skill that you can transfer, and genuinely having an interest in who your colleagues are and your teammates and your customers, and genuinely wanting to help them figure things out and just improve their lives in a meaningful way. Anything from helping them make small, tiny, life decisions that are a little better than are often found on sales floors, to, speaking to potential customers and prospects and like genuinely caring about their business and helping them out, and helping navigate somebody's career. One of the most rewarding things for me personally in all the, kind of head of sales, VP of sales roles I've had is watching somebody and working with somebody, even like yourself, who's got a year and a half of experience now, and watching them grow from SDR to AE or to customer success rep, and then, director of customer success one day, and just feeling like you made an impact. So, you got to work on understanding humans, and you get there by asking the right questions, which is a sales skill. You get there by listening better, which should also be a sales skill, right? And just taking the time to get to know people and putting their needs ahead of yours. You end up getting what you want, I think, if you help enough other people get what you want.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say, and you've already started it, is for a little while, unless you've already done this, double down on the disc stuff, right? Go back and study it some more, learn some more, because it will help you do the things Scott's talking about, right? You can do a better job of active listening when you know what to listen for. And you can really look at that, as you said, sort of at that personality level. So I think that's good. If you've, you know, for lack of a better word, mastered DISC, or you're bored with it, look at some other personality tests. I think Strength Finders 2.0 is a really fun one. I think Divine, there's one called DISC, which is sort of like an X-ray, and then there's Divine, which is like an MRI, which goes even deeper. So I think those things will be really, really helpful. Because to Scott's point, like, you got to be able to listen to what these people are saying, and being able to check your own ego, because you know what other egos are doing, is really, really helpful in that role. That's transferable, whether it's in sales or marketing. And whether people like it or not, people are always selling. Even engineers have to sell their idea to their boss, or the product engineer has to sell that this is what they think is the next thing based on the data they've collected. So everybody's in some kind of a, you know, position to present their ideas in that way. So I think those things are really, really important, and you got to know who you're dealing with. So,
yeah. So Sarah, so we're coming to the end of our show here today. Tell everybody, you know, how they can connect with you. What's the best place to find you and learn more about you and follow your career and your insights that you share with everybody?
I'm sure it's Instagram, right?
Right. It's Snapchat, actually. So you can find me on LinkedIn. And I believe I'm looking at what my so it's linkedin.com/in/Sarah J. Drake. There are about 100,000 Sarah Drakes in this world. It's a very common name. So
find Sarah Drake at Directive, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Or Sarah Drake Directive.
Orange County,
OC.
And connect with me. Just say, hey, I love adding people to my network, sales or whatever. But yeah, connect with me on there. And yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Listen to us talk the past hour or so.
Yeah, this has been great. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day. Hannah, thank you for letting Sarah come on. Listen to Sarah more often, Hannah. That's my advice. She knows what she's doing. But thank you again for coming on. We appreciate it. And one last question. You know, are you going to get to come down to Surf and Sales in February? Are you coming?
I'm definitely thinking about it. I'm going to have to put some extra money away from the paycheck, and I am god awful at sales, at surfing.
Oh,
that's so funny.
No.
You have to cut that part out.
No, we're leaving it in. We're being authentic. We're being transparent.
We are so transparent. At the end of all of this, Sarah's bad at sales. No, she's not. I'm bad at surfing, but if you can teach me some surfing and some sales, I'm definitely going to consider it. If you've considered going to surf and sales, do it. I've heard nothing but incredible things about it. Invest in yourself and it'll take you far. So
Hannah, that was as much for you as it was for Sarah.
Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Guys.
Talk to you later.
Thank you so much.